Welcome back to episode 5 in this series on how to get great looking video out of Vegas Pro. In this video we're going to be talking about images and graphics and video clips that use the full RGB range. So if you've been following along up until now, you know that basically all still images and all graphics that are available within Vegas use the full range video levels, as opposed to video clips which typically use the video range levels. If you're using video clips and you want to simply deliver to video formats, the previous video will give you some solutions on how to go about doing that. But if you're wanting to mix both video clips as well as still images and graphics from within Vegas, then there's a few other things that you need to be aware of. The first thing to note is, as we've talked about before, Vegas Pro respects image levels when they come in, so it doesn't scale them like other applications do. That means that if you get a clip here like this one here that is using full range levels, you can see that they are above 100 and below 0 contained in this clip, then Vegas is going to deliver this out. Even if it is being rendered out to a video format that requires video levels, it's still going to spit out all of the data levels that are contained in here. The same thing is true with Vegas's own graphics. So if, for example, you were to take something like a color gradient and drop that onto the Vegas timeline, this graphic is designed for full range levels. You can see here that this contains whites that are illegal and also blacks that are illegal. So if you are using still images such as this, if you're using full range images or full range video such as this, or if you're using the graphics within Vegas itself, you're going to be working with full range images. So how do you go about dealing with this? Well, there's a couple of different options, and it's worth keeping in mind that if you're working with both video level content as well as full range content on the same timeline, you are going to need to balance them out. So if you want to work in full range, I would suggest a few things to set up to begin with. The first thing you should probably do is, if you want to work in full range, you should have your scopes set to full range. So we have them set to the default, which is the Studio RGB levels. You'll notice that if I change this to full range, we're now still working within that 0 to 100, but everything has been compressed to within that range. Now there's an important caveat with this, and that is, if I simply go File, Render As, and render this out to a video format, and that is the bulk of the formats that Vegas renders out to, when this video gets played back, it is going to stretch it out, and you're going to end up with results that look like that, where the image has been crushed and doesn't look the same as it does in the preview. Now you can see what's happened here in these scopes. This is giving you some warning about it, but that's important to keep in mind. What you do need to do, however, with video range images is, if I go into a video range image like this one, you can see here that the black is actually lifted above 0. So we can see that this is not using the full range. And same thing is actually true up in the top here. So if I look at another video range image, you can see here it's peaking out at around that 235 point and is not getting down into clear black. So if you want to work with video range images within a full range timeline, then what you need to do is go to your levels, and you can simply drag the Studio RGB to Computer RGB levels effect onto the clip, and you make that the first thing that you do, and that will correct this for full range. Now once you've done that, you need to keep in mind that these videos, unless you do something else with them, will come out crushed when you go to render them. So like the other full range images here, we have essentially turned these, by dropping that levels effect on them, into full range images. Now the advantage of this is that, looking at the video here in the preview, this will give you a full range preview. So I can get down to a true black and to a pure white here. I get a nice high contrast preview, as opposed to the preview that we were getting before. So once you've done that with your video clips, we now have a range of full range video, full range stills, full range graphics, and video range clips that have been stretched out to be full range. So how do I go about delivering this appropriately for places like YouTube and Vimeo and others. Frankly, there's only really one good solution, and it's to manually perform the same process that a lot of these other applications will do automatically. So that is to add a computer to studio levels effect on the entire timeline just as you go to render. So we'll go back to our timeline. So I go to video effects, I find, now this, remember, this is the opposite of what I just did. So I stretched these ones out when I was putting them onto my full range timeline. Now I'm going to compress the entire timeline down. And the way to do that is that you grab the computer RGB to studio RGB level effect and you just drop it onto the entire timeline. And you'll see immediately that the colors will go a bit grey. So this is not useful if you are planning to continue to do your color grading. This is only something you do right before you render. Okay, so then you go up to File and Render As, and you render to whatever format you choose to. And then you just need to make sure if you come back to this clip at a later date that you turn the effect off. Okay, so it'll live up here in the effect. That's popped up on my other screen. Let's bring that back over here. And you can see here that is the effect. There's other levels that I've got here is the SEMW extension, which I've talked about previously. Okay, so you can ignore that. This is the one that we just added, and it should be at the very end. So it should be the very last thing that happens before the video gets rendered. So what that does is basically the same process that occurs in other applications where they compress the clip down to the 16 to 235 range, or 64 to 940 if you're dealing with 10-bit images or 10-bit renders. And then it outputs it, and then the player, once it gets that video in the correct video range, will stretch it back out again. Nice thing about this is that it allows you to use full range scopes, which is what we've been using, okay, and it'll give you a good indication of what the video will look like using those scopes. Generated graphics, text and images will remain true, provided you put that effect on at the end and you are using full range text, graphics and images to begin with. A couple of disadvantages of it is that it's easy to forget and may cause some confusion. And when I say that, it's easy to forget because you have to make sure you add it just before you render it, and when you do add it, you end up with a video that looks slightly different from what you were expecting. Okay, the video immediately does that, which can be a little bit confusing for you. The other thing, aspect of confusion around this is that, of course, when you go back to it, if you render something out and you upload it and then you want to make some changes and you go back to it, you have to remember to turn it off before you start making changes again, because otherwise you're going to be changing them in the wrong level. It also requires the adjustment of any video level clips, including test patterns. So I have mentioned this previously. The Vegas test patterns are designed to be output, to be stretched. And so if you compress them first and then they get stretched, they end up in the wrong levels. Likewise, video level content, such as that screen recording, such as this clip I had, and also the video camera clipped straight off a video camera, these are at the wrong level. And so if you put this computer RGB to studio RGB effect on them without having corrected them to begin with, then you're going to end up with even less contrast in these clips. Now, I want to briefly explain this generated graphics colors remaining true in a little bit more detail, because I have talked about it a couple of times. So let's say hypothetically you are doing some work for Starbucks, and I happen to know that the Starbucks green color is 011274, okay, in the RGB coordinates. So this is Starbucks green, which is great. Now, if I don't do anything with this, what happens is when I go to output it, the green will actually change very slightly. Now, that didn't look like it changed very much, but let me see if I can show you. If I just go to this one here, I've got a color picker. All right, so the original green, as you can see, is 111274. Okay, that was the green that we made using this. Now the green that's in the preview, or the green that will be displayed, and we've used this SEMW extension to demonstrate what it's going to look like on, say, YouTube or something. If I go there and I click on this, you can see that the color has changed just very slightly, 11267. Now the change is up to 7% because it's stretched essentially from the middle of the luminance range outwards in both directions. Different colors will have more or less variation. So this may or may not be important to you, depending on what you're doing. If you're just doing titles, you're not too worried about the colors shifting a tiny bit, then this is not really going to be a huge worry for you. But if you're doing some important branding and you need exactly the right color in terms of these RGB coordinates to be displayed, then this may well be an important consideration for you. The way to get around this is to use this Computer Studios FX on the graphics that get generated within Vegas, because with the exception of the test pattern, all of these graphics are designed for full range. So they need to be compressed down using this tool in order to be displayed correctly if you're outputting them to video level players or to video level codecs. And for most people, the easiest way of doing this is, as I discussed before, so make sure that all of your clips, including the video range ones, are expanded to full range, and then make sure you put this Computer RGB to Studio RGB levels effect onto the final timeline just before you go about rendering it. Now, naturally, there is one other suggestion that I need to make. That within Tim's tools, there is a version of Perfect Exposure designed specifically for full range footage. So as we discussed on the last video clip, you can use this to make sure that your video is all set to full range. And I will give you an example here. This tool, incidentally, if you're using other applications, if you're using DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere, something like that, this is the tool, the version of this tool that you would want to get hold of that can be used in those as well. So it works the same way as the dedicated Vegas version, but this of course is for full range. So you would go to it, you would find Perfect Exposure, and you'll see that this will change. In this particular video that we're looking at here, this is full range because it is a still image that we're looking at. So all of those are still images. If I go to this one and we remove the level effect that I put on it, in fact I'll remove all of the effects, you can see here that this is not at the correct level if we want it, if we want to get it to full range. So I can, in this case, do essentially the opposite of what I did in the last video, and that is expand it out to get it to full range. So the advantage of this is I can do all of this without scopes. So as long as I don't get too red, I know that those title bars are not supposed to be pure white, so I can be just below that. And likewise, I can get down with it as low as purple. Everything, once things get to purple, they are black, so I don't want to go that far. So maybe we'll go somewhere around there, okay? And that will give us a nice full range image. If we had another video level image, we can do the same thing. So we know that we want the sky to be pure white, so I can get that to that, and you can see that I've still retained some little detail in the sky there, a little bit of the clouds, and we can make sure that we get maximum contrast in the ground as well. So this tool basically works the same way in full range as it does in the Vegas levels range. So it really just comes down to how you like to work. So once we've done that, we can then turn off the tool or delete it altogether if we choose to, and we've got an image that has high contrast there without any clipping or crushed blacks. Now this may not necessarily be exactly the look that you are going for, but it just shows the range that you can get to. So I know that this is now a full range image, provided I make sure I compensate for this if I'm delivering it to a video level format by using that same technique that we discussed in the last suggestion with the Computer RGB to Studio RGB level effect. Then I am going to get good results even with video level content out of this as well. So that tool is worth having a look at if it interests you. It is available at the link in the description below. The final video in our series is going to be talking about what if you want to use external OFX or LUTs. I hope you can tune in to watch that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.